Hi, today I'm going to interview Sarah and Jessica, and they're here to talk about their book, which they've just written, which is called Love the Foods That Set You Free. And this is about Sarah's journey in terms of she was suffering from MS, and she decided to do some research and find out what was causing this. And she eventually decided or realized that sugar was playing a huge part in the way her body was functioning. So she reduced the amount of sugar that she had in her body. She also reduced the amount of animal fat that she would eat by not eating as much meat. And she found that her chronic hay fever disappeared completely. She also stopped the progression of the MS in her body, and she had a number of other benefits that she experienced because of reducing the sugar and reducing the meat that's in her diet. And her daughter are here today to talk about their experiences and what they know, what they've learned from this journey. Your title is Love the Foods That Set You Free. So how have you guys been set free? If you could tell me a little bit about that.
Well, it's me really that's been set free, and you maybe a little less so. I was definitely bound by a number of health issues,
Right.
which had a significant effect on my life.
Right.
Various symptoms that I'd had for maybe as much as 30 years or more.
Right.
Some of them serious and some of them more trivial. Many of them the sort of issues that people have as they go through middle age and into old age.
Yep.
Some of them not, some of them quite unusual. But by changing the way I live, changing the way I eat, changing the way I live, I've actually freed myself to a large extent from almost all of them.
Okay.
So hence the set you free.
So you said to a large extent. So can you give us some details about like what has changed in your life?
Okay, well, things that have completely gone. Hay fever. I had hay fever as early as I can remember, from a very tiny child.
Right.
Badly, really badly. And I've had it through spring, summer and autumn every year my entire life. So I've been on drugs throughout all my life doing.
So you had to take medication for it?
I had to take medication every single day to get through the day.
Right.
It was as bad in my teens as, when I was taking my exams at the end of school. I had to sit with a nose bag at the exam table because I couldn't stop to keep blowing my nose and sneezing. It was that bad.
Right.
Anyway, that has now totally gone. I don't get it at all. Not at all. Not even a whisker of it.
Wow. And what do doctors say when you tell them that, or if you have told them?
I must say I haven't really discussed that particular issue with doctors, but certainly my GP is very supportive of what I'm doing, and she's understanding the reasons why what I'm doing is working. And indeed, what I'm doing is none of it is magic. None of it is alternative. It's all mainstream. It's just not available yet to the general public because it's not taught in medical school. However, there are plenty of doctors around the world who have gone through a normal medical training and then have been really disappointed that they can't cure people of things like hay fever or whatever, and have looked further into why people have these problems in the first place, not just trying to give a pill to solve it, but to why does this person have this complaint. And those doctors around the world, some of them are doctors, some of them are medical researchers. There's masses of publications on this very topic that come to much the same conclusions as I have, and many of them I mention in the book. Some of them are people who look at heart disease, some of them look at cancer, some of them look at allergies, autoimmunity, arthritis, overweight. Weight was another thing for me. I've been overweight all my life. But as soon as I made these changes, the weight just dropped off. And I wasn't on a diet. I wasn't counting calories. I was just looking after my gut health.
Wow, okay. And so the central thing that I got from reading the book is the idea of like sugar. So that's the central idea in the book. Is that right to say that?
I wouldn't say it was necessarily central, but it is a key idea, certainly. And it's the first thing that I bring out in chapter 1. because it was the first thing that I discovered.
I think it is key in the fact that it leads on to so much more.
Yep.
And for example, you mentioned gut health, that sugar is one of the biggest and first steps in terms of maintaining and managing and supporting gut health.
Yep.
So in that sense, I feel like it's, and that's why it's the first chapter, because it's that first key to moving forward.
And also it's having made the change with sugar in your life makes all the other changes much easier. And I'll explain why if you'd like.
Yeah, sure. We'll go through them.
Yep.
Because I just wanted to focus a little bit on sugar firstly, because this is something I have trouble with.
Yes.
Always eating so much sugar. So I just want to talk a little bit about sugar to start with. So that's the first thing that's mentioned in the book. Now, this might sound like a silly question, but considering that sugar is natural, why is it that sugar is so bad for people?
Okay, well, it's not natural in the form that you eat it. It's highly refined.
Okay.
So if you went and tore down a piece of sugar cane and chewed on it.
Yep.
Okay. First of all, there'd be a lot of fibre involved with what you were eating.
Right. Okay. Fibre.
Yeah. Fibre is a central issue in all of this.
Yep.
And that in itself would mean that you would assimilate the sugar much more slowly in your system, and therefore it would do you a lot less damage. The sort of sugar that we eat typically in our diets, which is table sugar, it also means, unfortunately, things like honey, things like maple syrup, things. A particularly bad one is high fructose corn syrup, which is in a lot of processed food.
Right.
Those are things that come into your body with no fibre, and so they get processed in your system immediately.
Right.
And they lead to blood sugar high, blood glucose high, and that in itself then causes all sorts of knock-on problems, ultimately leading to overweight and diabetes type 2 and many things.
Right.
It's basically what we would call an inflammatory substance, and causes an inflammatory response, which we can talk about more as well as we go.
Sure.
And so it's a key underlying issue if you're eating sugar. And I know you say it's a natural product, but it's not a natural product in the way that we eat it.
So why is that? Why is it not natural? Why can't they just take the sugarcane sugar and put it directly into things to make it sweet and not be harmful?
Well, I mean, I don't know if you've ever had a look at a bit of sugar cane, but it's not sort
really.
It's almost like a bit of bamboo.
Yeah.
It's a really tough, fibrous plant. So I mean, it's not the sort of thing that you could easily eat.
Right. They couldn't shave it off or melt it down or something like.
Well, I don't know, but they don't. I
mean,
what they do is that they process out the sweet sucrose content.
Okay.
And
so they're stripping it of goodness.
They're stripping it of all the goodness.
Right.
What you're getting is simply calories plus substances that undermine your metabolism.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so what sort of things start to change, if you could go in a little bit of a detailed fashion, when sugar intake is reduced or cut out? I just want to say briefly about myself. I used to have a lot of difficulty going to bed and sleeping. I get a lot of shoulder pain. And I was talking with a friend, could have been even 10, 15 years ago, and he says, "Are you eating before bed?" And I was like, yeah. And he didn't say any more than that, but I was realizing that I was eating things like ice cream and, apple crumble and, that sort of stuff before bed. And then my body was just like this in the night. And so, obviously having read your book and realizing it before then, but, reading your book reminded me that how different it can be when I cut that sugar out. So now I don't eat any sweets anymore after dinner. And I sleep a lot better. So what's the sort of things that happen when you cut out sugar? Okay,
well, it does vary a little from person to person, but certainly for me, I first of all had some side effects, some withdrawal symptoms.
Right.
So that's to be aware that can happen. I had headaches and felt pretty not great for a couple of weeks. Thereafter, the craving for sugar went. it reminded me a lot of when I gave up smoking sort of 40 or 50 years ago, that, you know, you have this initial real struggle and think you can't possibly survive without. And there comes a point when you look back and you think, I can't imagine why I ever did that. And that absolutely happens with sugar. And it's really hard to believe until you do it.
Right.
And everybody I know who's followed this and done it says the same thing. So this is not just my opinion. In terms of how you feel, for me, the biggest thing that happened was that my cholesterol level dropped, and my weight dropped. So I didn't do anything else. The first step I did was just cut out sugar. And my cholesterol level went from very high to still a bit too high, but much lower.
Right.
And my weight dropped by about 8 to 10 kilos without me doing anything else. So I ate as much as I wanted, but just not sugar.
Right.
The key thing, though, that I just realised later when I started making some other changes was that the fact that I was no longer addicted to sugar meant that it was easy to make other changes. It was the sugar that was undermining my ability to change my diet.
Yep.
Once the sugar was gone, changing my diet in other ways was not difficult.
Yep. So there's an addiction factor there with the sugar.
Definitely.
Yep.
So other people I know who have done this, and I mentioned one or two of them in the book. One of them, Alice, you know, she was a young lady who drank a lot of juice because, of course, fruit juice is full of sugar.
Yeah.
And she drank it thinking it was a healthy option. But once we spoke and she realised that it was maybe something she shouldn't do, she simply stopped drinking juice, didn't change her diet in any other way. And she found, like you, that she slept much better, that she had more energy, that she didn't crave sugary food as much, that she enjoyed other food much more, and generally felt fitter and better. And this is a young lady. Another lady, a friend of mine, an older lady, she had very bad arthritis in her hands, which indeed I did. And when she cut sugar out, she found that the arthritis in her hands improved a lot, as mine has as well.
Right. So it didn't go away completely?
Not completely, but much better.
Right.
So I'd got to I play guitar, I'm a musician, and I got to the point when I couldn't play it anymore. It just hurt too much.
Right.
But that's not the case now. I can play it no problem.
Wow. Awesome.
So I think that links in as well to what we were talking about before with the inflammation and sugar. Right. That it's feeding that inflammatory response and inflammation in the body. So removing that can then quite quickly have impact on symptoms, any symptoms that are connected to inflammation.
Yep.
And also improve your gut health because you're suddenly not feeding the bacteria that are and relying on that sugar all the time.
Yeah, so could you clarify a little bit about, the idea of inflammation and gut health? Mm-hmm. Could you clarify those details a little bit?
You might want to do a bit more of that.
Okay. Well, so the sugar step was the first step I took. Right. And that was because my cholesterol was too high and I didn't want to take statins because statins gave me bad side effects. Right. So that was my first step. But a little later, after I'd done that for a while, I had a diagnosis which explained some of the other symptoms I had for years that I hadn't been able to get to the bottom of. And the diagnosis was a bit of a dramatic diagnosis. It was multiple sclerosis. Right. Which, you know, I had dual feelings because on the one hand, it's a horrible diagnosis. On the other hand, it was a relief to feel that there was a reason why I had all these peculiar symptoms.
And what sort of symptoms were they?
Well, I had really bad cramp. I mean, you know, really, really bad cramp that would stop me from driving and various things. Wake me up, 10 times every night. My balance got quite poor, particularly going downhill or downstairs. I would easily fall. I lost control to a slight extent of my throat. So, when I'm eating, I have to now think about what I'm doing or I choke. And I constantly have a bit of a frog in my throat. And I'm a singer, and it was affecting my singing, affecting my voice. I was feeling I was losing control of my voice.
And what sort of things were you eating at the time before this understanding?
A fairly normal sort of diet. I mean, I ate... I certainly wouldn't say it was a bad diet. I did eat some sugar, although I had given it up before I discovered the MS. I did eat some processed food, but I also ate a lot of organic food when it was available, and I ate mostly chicken and fish, occasionally red meat, quite a lot of vegetables, not masses, but a fair few vegetables and fruit, and I would have the occasional dessert, but no, I couldn't look at that diet and think, well, it was a really terrible diet. It was a fairly normal, healthy diet. I might start the day with muesli, but of course muesli is full of sugar, which I hadn't realised before looking into sugar. So where were we? Inflammation and gut health, right? So once I realised I had MS, I started doing some research into that, and I discovered a fellow called Dr. Professor George Jelinek, actually, who's a professor of epidemiology at Melbourne University.
Right.
Professor Jelinek was diagnosed with MS in the 90s, and he put his medical expertise into determining a way forward for himself and everybody who's got MS. And he looked at all of the studies and all of the research all over the world into the topic, and came up with a lifestyle program, eating and lifestyle program, which was devised to keep him and all of us as healthy as possible and to lower our inflammation levels. So I read his book and I went on his diet, not really understanding why it might work. And when I did so, my levels of inflammation clearly dropped because my arthritis got better again, and my hay fever went away, and my psoriasis, which I had, went away. And my MS, when I had my MRI scans yearly, was getting no worse, whereas up to that point it had been getting worse.
Right.
So it appeared to have halted the progress of the MS, and also my cholesterol, of course, dropped into normal levels now.
Right.
So suddenly I was on no drugs, I had no illnesses, and I felt fine. And I still did have a few symptoms of the MS, which I live with,
right,
but not ones that really have a terrible effect on my life.
Right.
And I came to understand that having an anti-inflammatory diet was a key part of this. So then you think, well, why have we got inflammation in the first place?
Yeah.
So then looking further, it appears that for a number of reasons we may have what's called a leaky gut, or it's called intestinal permeability. And this can be brought about from birth. If you're a cesarean birth, not breastfed, it can be brought about by high levels of stress, poor diet, additives in food. A number of things can lead to it, particularly a highly processed food diet, and sugar. So I realised that what I must have done accidentally in all of this is improved the state of my gut health, improved my leaky gut, and thus lowered my inflammation. So at that point, really, I stuck with that for a bit and felt extremely well. And people around me started saying, "What's happening? You're looking great. You've lost all this weight." Because I then continued to lose weight and ultimately lost about 20 kilos, again, without any calorie counting or anything like that. I told people, I said, well, this is what's happened. And people said to me, you need to give a talk about this because, we all need to know this. So through last year, I gave a couple of talks. And the second talk, people came up to me at the end and said, you need to write a book about this. Well,
I wonder what the next stage will be.
Writing a book's probably about the last thing on earth I would ever have thought of doing, because I'm very much a science technology person. But I thought, well, this is my story and I know it really well because I've lived it. So maybe it's the one thing I can write about. Yeah. So I sat down, took 2 or 3 weeks sabbatical, sat down and wrote it. And then went round the loop of involving Jess, because when we get to we talk about lots of other diseases, not just MS, because it made me realise as I was learning all this that this is just as relevant to any chronic illness that you've got, whether it be weight management, whether it be heart disease, whether it be high cholesterol, whether it be arthritis, any autoimmune disease particularly, and so forth.
But essentially what you've done, so you halted the MS. Did the MS reduced in tests?
I actually haven't had a test for the last 12 months, so I'm due for another one in August, which I may or may not do, depending with COVID.
Right.
But I don't feel the need to do it because I know myself that I'm well, and my cramp is less. My throat is not any better, but the cramp is a bit less, and the balance is maybe marginally better. But the main thing is I haven't got worse. And, the prognosis was that I might be in a wheelchair in 5 years, and there's no way I'm, fit.
Right. Yeah. So, but it kind of feels like it's getting better.
Maybe I don't want to be too sure about that.
Yeah.
But certainly it hasn't got worse.
Right.
And certainly my other complaints, which were several, have got better, and in fact some have completely gone.
Yeah, and in a kind of simplistic way, so that the first step is getting rid of sugar out of your diet, like not eating less, but just getting sugar out of your diet.
Yes.
Vegetables and fruits.
Lots of vegetables and fruits, lots of fibre, basically.
Yeah.
Now I know we've all heard eat lots of fibre, and I had heard that, and I thought I did, but trust me, I did not. So when they say you should have 5 fruit and vegetables a day, I would double that. Right? And that sounds like, how on earth am I going to eat that much fruit and vegetables? Well, you'll be amazed if people decide to go this way. They'll be amazed at what they can find on the internet in terms of recipes for the most delicious, varied foods that are predominantly vegetables, plants.
There's a good movement for the whole food plant-based perspective, and there's a lot of resources out there for that. It's a good place to start in terms of looking for recipes and ideas, because it covers a lot of what we cover. Not all in terms of things like oils and fats and stuff, but it's a great place to start in terms of thinking about how to remove sugar and put in a lot of whole food, whole grains, vegetables, fruits in really good recipes. Yeah,
for those who like to cook.
Yes, of course.
So how does your story fit with Jess and the two of you? How does that work?
Well, so the first half of the book is very much my story and explaining how I sort of accidentally really came across all of this information and found myself intrigued to study it more and more. And in fact, I'm just about to start a postgraduate degree with Deakin University in nutrition.
Right.
So I've become really interested in the topic. But the second half of the book needed to be about how to help people to make these changes. And they don't necessarily have to do exactly what I've done. But any movement away from sugar and away from high animal product diet to a more plant-based diet, a whole food diet, away from processed foods, that sort of thing. Any movement will improve the situation. And felt with the second half of the book, we felt we needed to express how to do that. So that Jess came in very much to that.
Yeah. And, I started doing a lot of editing with Mum.
Right.
Of the book, and thinking about, well, how can we make this readable, and how do we make it relatable, and all that sort of stuff. And then we got to a nearly finished product, and like you said, it just felt like we just needed a bit more of, well, how to actually apply that to your life. What does that look like, and what could it look like for different people, and just not that you can necessarily do that entirely without face-to-face support from, whether it be professionals or friends or family or whoever it is. But it felt like we needed a bit of direction to help people get started. So that's really what I tried to contribute.
Yeah, and it's better to work as a team too.
Absolutely.
That's great.
Yeah. Well, we started working as a team, and then it became clear that I had something to contribute for myself. So
that's great. Yeah, so what do people do to heal themselves of whatever condition? What I mean is, what's the spectrum of conditions that you think it might have an impact on, like reducing sugar, increasing fibre, eating fruits and vegetables, that sort of thing, in terms of you had MS, which most people would consider a uncurable incurable disease. So what do you think is open to being able to change?
I would say that any chronic illness, and when I say chronic, I mean an illness that continues.
Yep.
So not an acute illness like the flu, or but an illness like high cholesterol, heart disease, cancer, any autoimmune diseases, arthritis, any allergies, fibromyalgia.
Mental health issues.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what was my next question.
Absolutely. The gut and the brain are linked. There are messages going from the gut to the brain all the time. If your gut is out of whack, your brain's going to be out of whack.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not suggesting that by sorting out your gut, you're going to sort out all your mental illness problems, but certainly it has to help. It has to be a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, there was that Jamie Oliver thing years ago. I remember watching where he went into schools and the schools had a very low budget for food, and they were eating meat pies and sausage rolls and little hot dog weenie things or whatever. And he went in there and with a limited amount of food managed to turn it into more healthy. And he found a lot of the problem was getting the kids to enjoy it, first of all, because they weren't really interested in it.
Yeah.
But when he did, he said that he noticed there's a lot of things like, people who had ADHD, that was being reduced.
Yeah.
And they were able to get off the drugs and things like that. So...
Yeah, I think it's not... We haven't read a lot of the research in that specific area, so I can't go too far in terms of what we say. But on the other hand, there is things that we've come across in terms of mental health.
Yeah.
That's there's clearly links there. Again, like how far you say that link goes, we don't know the answer. But the fact that link goes somewhere.
Yep.
There's that gives you the power and freedom to you can decide what you eat, that is within your control to extents, and there's tools there to make change, and positive change.
Yep.
Which is really important, and it is so broad in terms of what it can impact in your life.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I must say that from my own perspective, I didn't particularly have mental health issues as such, but when you start feeling slim and fit and young and great and energetic, it has to improve any mental health issue, I would have thought.
Yep. And I had a question here. What do you think is the most important message from your book that you'd like your audience to know about? I mean, because this so far is really interesting. What's your biggest message? Okay,
my biggest message is that there are things out there that you can do for yourself that we are not generally told. It's not a secret. If you go on the internet and look up any of the things I've said, you'll find doctors and researchers all over the world talking about this. And people like Michael Mosley, people know Michael Mosley, and many others like him around the world who are desperately trying to get this information out. And it's quite hard because you're fighting against an incumbent habit. Dietary habit, and industries, the pharmaceutical industry, the food industry. It's difficult to make a big change like this. So basically what my intention in writing the book was to just make this information available to anyone who wants to read it, and they can take from it what they like, and they can make the changes that they want. They don't have to do what I do, but any of these changes will improve their situation. If they don't want to take statins, actually you may not have to, like I don't have to now, because you can do some of these things. If you have got an autoimmune disease, I've got a couple of other friends who had different autoimmune diseases that they didn't like having. They had to take a lot of medication. They were sick a lot of the time. They made these changes and they are now well. Now, it isn't that their autoimmune diseases have gone away completely, but they are no longer suffering symptoms and side effects. They're now well and healthy.
Why do you think that people are still clueless as to what poor diet is doing to their bodies? Why are people not aware of what's going on?
Yes, well, I think there are a number of reasons. I think a key one is that doctors in medical school are trained hardly at all about nutrition. I think it's one unit that is optional. Michael Mosley actually said his son is currently in medical school and he still gets no training on nutrition. So your GP, your doctor, is unlikely to know very much about nutrition. So they most likely will have heard that eating fibre is good for you and that eating too much fat is not great and eating too much sugar is not great. And certainly we kind of all know that. But they may not be able to take it any further than that. So that's one reason. Another reason is I think we have got into a habit of the way that we eat and the way that our food is produced that has changed subtly over the last 50 years. I think I can think back to my childhood, and I mean we didn't have a lot of pre-made processed foods. We didn't have many packaged foods. I mean maybe there were some breakfast cereals, but not many, and they weren't particularly sugary. And yes, my mother would make a dessert sometimes, but our meals were largely a bit of meat and a lot of vegetables. And my school lunch would be maybe salad sandwich, cheese salad sandwich perhaps, and a piece of fruit. But the idea of the sort of food that you see children having in their lunchbox now, which are pre-packaged this or that, very often, didn't exist in those days. So we've changed the way we eat in a subtle way, slowly, over a 50-year period. And now it's actually just not comparable with what we were eating before. And it feels to me that we've devised a diet that doesn't match with our biochemistry as humans. Now, why don't people know that? Have you got anything to say about that?
I think one thing that's relevant is a lot of the assumptions that we're raised with. So things like, we all have the idea that milk is good for us because it gives us calcium. That's a innate idea that's presented early in our life. And things that, red meat is good for us for whatever reason. Maybe protein. We think it gives us protein, it gives us energy, or whatever reasons that we have in our minds. But a lot of those assumptions are very strong. And they appear in the habits of our daily life, and that we might not question or have concern about how farming practices have changed and what that red meat might look like in comparison to historically, and other meats as well. So
there's a lot of old ideas that we're kind of carrying through, pretty much.
Old ideas that we're carrying through, but also things that have changed in that time frame. Even things like, the cost of meat and its availability. My understanding is that, historically that was a luxury. It was expensive. It was, maybe we're going to have a Sunday roast and that's going to be our big, and we'll carry over the leftovers through the week or whatever. Whereas now we see that, there's, ham is easily available. It's, prevalent in every lunchbox usually, as a just staple product. So things like that I imagine are quite different in terms of what we see as our normal.
And also, I mean, that documentary, The Game Changers, which is interesting. I'm sure you've seen that.
Yes.
And they were talking about how, the cost of production of meat, because they have to feed the animal, and they have to feed them up nice and fat so then they can sell it. So it seems to suggest that it would be cheaper to have plant-based meats. But if you go to the supermarket, the plant-based meats are double the price of the regular meats. Why do you think that is?
I would guess it's because it's a new thing. The economies of scale have not come in.
Right.
And I think that will change. It is changing. Those were not even available only a couple of years ago.
Well, that's true,
When I started the diet that I'm on, which I don't necessarily espouse for everybody, it was really difficult to find some of the products I needed, and certainly difficult to eat out. But now it's not at all. I mean, there's plenty of options for me everywhere I go. I have no trouble at all.
I mean, you can go to Domino's Pizzas now and they've got a myriad of vegan options. Like you said, there's a lot of places you can get that sort of food. Do you think when they do, because now it's become a kind of not a niche, a popular thing to do, to say, where's your plant-based version? Do you think in every case that is actually a healthier option? Or do you think sometimes there may be an issue where they're making it plant-based, but it may be something that's not healthy? Or is it generally healthier?
I think it's a really interesting point, and probably quite open to debate at this stage in terms of the fats and oils that are being used to create some of those plant-based alternative products.
Yep.
Because they could, depending how they're produced, for an example, like a plant-based cheese.
Yep.
That could come from a number of sources, and it could potentially be very high in saturated fats or trans fats, which are really damaging for the trans fats, particularly really damaging for your cells across the whole of your body.
Yep.
So that's probably not a product that I would look to buy for that reason. But that being said, I mean, these are all choices that we all need to make. I mean, if you're out at a restaurant and, you know, perhaps you haven't chosen that restaurant, you're there for a family event.
Yep.
And the options on the menu are such that you're choosing between a meat or dairy option or a plant-based cheese option.
Yep.
Personally, I would choose the plant-based cheese option.
Yep.
But I would be doing that recognising that that's not something that I'd want as a staple part of my diet. I wouldn't put that in my fridge as my cheese alternative. Because that's going to have trans fats in it most likely.
Yeah, so you've got extra information there which helps you make a choice.
Yeah.
It is quite tricky because it's kind of get into this new arena where people are looking at plant-based things, but whether or not they're healthy or not is tricky. I noticed from reading the book, one of the things I've started looking for now is less than 5% of sugar.
Yeah.
And the other thing was, trying to make sure there's no trans fats. Not that I'm even really sure what trans fats is still. But I noticed the other day I bought something that had 0.01 grams of trans fats. And I'm like, wow, it's so small. But I remember you wrote in there, no trans fats.
No, well, it's to do with it's to do with your cell membranes. That the trans fat will go into the cell membrane, and it's not as permeable as the normal fats that create your cell membrane.
Right.
It's quite rigid in comparison.
Okay.
So your cells move around. They're not a static item. They need to be able to move around, and that's how that they take in things from outside of the cell. It's how they produce something and get it outside to the rest of your body.
Right.
They need that cell wall to be really malleable.
Okay.
Not that it's not, strong and does its job, but if it's got trans fats in there, it's more likely that it's going to rupture.
Right. So you're basically saying zero trans fats is the best
if at all possible. Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Basically, one of the things that it seems so very obvious, but kind of I didn't really think about it before all this, is that the only way your body is built is from the food you eat. There's nothing else. Well, the air you breathe, I suppose. But so when the fats that you eat, be they saturated fats or monounsaturated fats or trans fats, they're the ones that build the cell membranes in your body. And so if you're eating damaged fats, you're building damaged cells.
Yeah, that really struck me when I was pregnant, because having studied science and biology and physiology, I can understand what's happening in pregnancy. But then when I was actually pregnant, it struck me that I'm doing nothing other than eating food. Yep. That is all I'm doing, and my body is doing everything else. Yep. And this person is being built from what I eat. Which is, again, not something that had really struck me until then.
What about in terms of, I can remember years ago I climbed Mount Fuji, all right, when I was in Japan. And people gave me lots of advice. They said, take lots of candy bars, okay? Yep. And so, because we're climbing for about 6 hours, and then you have a rest, and then you get up in the middle of the night and then go to the summit. So I had a lot of candy bars with me, and I was eating them along the way. And I noticed I didn't get tired because I was having so much sugar in the body. Okay, so if you're doing extreme exercise, is that a case where sugar is not so bad because you're burning it off, or is it still too much?
Interesting question. I mean, I'm sure that you did burn it off, and it was fine for you at that point. But I can tell you that there are a number of people who are elite athletes, and Novak Djokovic is one of them. Serena Williams is another. Yep. Who eat plant-based all the time. Yep. and they, you can't be fitter than they are.
Yep.
So you definitely don't need to eat sugar to have energy.
And I think in terms of thinking about what is best for your body, then doing it without the sugar would be best.
Right.
Not necessarily to say that obviously you can do it with the sugar, and it might get you to the end goal, but the after effects of that might not be great. You might find things like if you've got arthritis or any other inflammatory things going on in your body, then having had that much sugar is going to bring all that stuff out again.
Yeah, and look, I have something, this is a bit of a personal experience that I've tried to battle with, and interesting that you mentioned Djokovic, because I love tennis and I play a lot of tennis. And ever since I was young, I can remember. Now, when I play tennis, I'll play not nearly as good as Djokovic, but I'll play for that length of time, a couple of hours, and totally exhausted at the end of it. And I would always reach a point, excuse me, where I couldn't keep my focus, couldn't maintain my focus. And I do remember Djokovic saying something like he was always struggling with his concentration, and then he went vegan, and then he was just unbeatable since then. Because it was like mid 2000, maybe like 2013, 2014 or something, he did that. And since then, he's just been, if you look at the statistics in comparison to the other players, he's leagues ahead.
Yeah.
He's catching up to Federer and Nadal in terms of Grand Slams and stuff. And you watch him and you think, how can he keep going? And of course, he's really slimmed down as well. So, yeah, it's interesting because I've really struggled with concentration for a long time in terms of because I almost feel like when I get to a certain amount of heat in my head, because I'm running around everywhere, I just get dizzy and lose my focus. So do you think with a plant-based and more natural sugar from, let's say, like a banana or a piece of fruit, that sort of thing, that it helps with concentration too and that sort of thing?
I think that's very likely. And certainly in terms of it's not eating that kind of food is not having your blood sugar going up and down, in response to your eating, in the way that if you're having more natural food products is keeping you within a lower range of that blood glucose variability.
Yep.
Which, I think in turn has lots of positive effects. But I'd say that's likely one of them.
Yeah, because I also had problems with, I would have water. I'd have a huge jug of water and I would drink it, and then my knees would get tired because I didn't have enough sugar in my body. Yeah. And so then, and I feel bad now, but then I started having a Gatorade.
Yeah.
Just
to try and bring that back up. Absolutely.
And I felt like my energy levels was a lot better, but the problem is then, of course, and I just felt like it was normal in tennis that you play for, say, 15 minutes, you're running around, and then you get a little bit hot and your concentration goes off. Yeah. And it's kind of just seemed like it was part and parcel of the tennis game, but it'd be interesting to try some different foods when I'm playing.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting, though, what you said about, you feel that that's normal. But I feel like that's so much of what we all get lulled into, in that because it's common and because we haven't tried it differently, it seems normal, and it's what we expect. Yep. We expect to get older and things to go wrong in our bodies. We just expect that.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Sorry, my two favourite sports is tennis and Formula One, and I think even Lewis Hamilton is vegan, isn't he? Maybe you probably don't know Lewis Hamilton.
Not my field.
I have to say that I'm not necessarily espousing a vegan diet. I'm more espousing a much more vegetables and fruit diet.
Right, okay.
But, certainly Djokovic is vegan. And one of the interesting things I've heard him say is that he finds he recovers from his exercise much quicker. And that's something that I've noticed myself. So, I can go on my exercise bike and I can look at my heart rate when I'm on the exercise bike, and I'm going up to 120. I get off the bike and within 30 seconds it's back to normal. Now, that never happened to me before. So I can't explain that, and I've tried to keep everything I've said in the book based on scientific evidence, on scientific trials, and from people who have done trials and so forth. So I haven't talked about that because I don't know why that happens, but it does seem to happen.
So now I want to talk a little bit about we've been kind of dancing around a little bit, but what is the real issue with eating animal meat? Because like we were saying before, people think that animals are going to have the highest form of protein, and protein is kind of like the building blocks of our bodies. So what's the problem with eating meat?
I don't think there's necessarily a problem with eating small quantities of meat. Personally, I don't do it because there's a strong implication between saturated fat and problems with MS.
Okay.
So I have kept saturated fat out of my diet as much as I possibly can, which has meant not eating meat, but I do eat fish.
Right.
People I know who have tried this diet for all sorts of various different reasons have cut their meat quantity down dramatically, and some of them have cut it out completely. All of them say that they feel better for having done so. In terms of the protein, there's actually a lot of protein in plants, particularly legumes and nuts and grains, but there's actually protein in all vegetables. It's not difficult to get. I actually have checked this carefully to work out how much protein I needed to get the recommended amount, and it's not difficult at all to do that with plants. For me, I'd have a bit of fish as well. I eat fish about once a week.
And is it true that people who go from, like, let's say a high meat diet suddenly going cold turkey and going straight to vegetables, that it can cause some protein deficiencies, or is that a myth?
I think it would depend on how you eat. Like, it's,
how quick.
But also it's about if you haven't got a good understanding of what your options are in terms of vegetables. And I think this is certainly something that people are aware of when you're making a large dietary change, that if you're not familiar with what your options are in your new diet, that you might choose to just eat, the same things. Like, so you might just be having lots of basic salad. So lots of, like, a lettuce and cucumber and capsicum salad. Whereas actually you need to be looking at a big range of vegetables and whole grains to cover your nutritional needs.
Right.
In the absence of other products.
Right. What about nuts?
Yes, good. I eat a good handful of nuts every day.
Okay. Are there preservatives in nuts that can be damaging?
I think you can be careful where you buy them. I haven't come across any damaging ones personally, but I tend to buy dry roasted because I don't want any additional oils in them. Okay,
because I notice if I eat nuts, I feel very groggy afterwards, but I'm thinking it's because I have unsalted peanuts and then I mix it with trail mix, which has got dried fruit in there. So what about dried fruit?
Dried fruit is an interesting one because it's concentrated fruit. There's more concentrated sugar in it than there is in an ordinary piece of fruit. So if you eat a handful of grapes, for example, you get fluid and you get a lot of fibre. But if you eat what would be a small amount of sultanas, you don't get the fluid and you get a higher concentration of sugar. So this is a tricky one. Some non-sugar advocates say no dried fruit, and I must say that I don't have any, but I think small quantities is probably fine.
I have heard people like to find a middle ground, to really consider how much of that fruit would you eat if it was whole. So would you eat a whole box of grapes if it was sultanas, or if you're eating like a dried apple product or dates or something, considering what would that look like in its original form and how much of it would I eat. And also making sure that you're not eating it by itself, so you're not just having a stomach full of that high sugar product, having fluid with it, that sort of stuff. But then if you're going to that much effort to recreate what it's like in its original form, you'd probably just be better off having it in the original form. I used to love eating dried apricots, and I had to stop because I think they have preservative 220 or 202 or something in there, which other dried fruits don't seem to have. But wherever I see that, I always used to get a lot of bad effects from that. So I had to stop.
which is really unfortunate. But
it's not something I've come across. But again, just have apricots.
That's true.
Just go for the original product if it's something you really like. Obviously, they're seasonal, so there's limitations, but
keep it as close to the way that the plant came out of the ground or off the tree or whatever. Eat as close to the original product as you can. I think that's the rule of thumb.
What about smoothies?
Yes, well, I regularly have a smoothie for breakfast.
Okay.
My smoothie consists of half soy and half almond milk.
Okay.
Because I'm a no dairy person, because of the saturated fat. And I put a handful of blueberries, a handful of some red berry, strawberry or raspberry, and usually half a banana. And that gives me a substantial breakfast. Lasts me through till I might have that about 8 o'clock in the morning. That lasts me through till about 1 p.m. Without anything else apart from a cup of coffee.
I find that smoothies can be a really useful way to have an oil supplement because you can blend it into the smoothie. You don't really taste it if it's not something that you want to be tasting. So we talk about oils in the book, and a lot of the various health professionals who have a diet that they espouse include an omega-3 supplement. So a good way to do that can be in a smoothie. I also find it's a really nice way to have a variety, because again, one of the factors is to have a variety of foods. You can pop a lot of stuff into a smoothie and it tastes great, and you've had a lot of variety. And also berries and things, they're cheaper frozen. You can shove them in a smoothie and have them more regularly.
Low sugar, they're very low sugar.
Yeah.
So because obviously it's still all in there, it's just been liquefied.
Exactly.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, cool. Yeah, okay, so how do we stay on the diet when it becomes... initially it might be a little bit inconvenient. So what advice would you give to people who, they're not used to changing what they eat so dramatically? What would you say to those people?
Well, I'm going to tell you what happened to me, but then I'm going to hand over to Jess because she's better at understanding what everybody else might do.
Right.
But certainly for me, once I started feeling so great, staying on the diet was not hard at all.
Right.
If you put a chocolate cake in front of me, I know that it will make me feel bad. I just don't want it. Feeling this good after having felt so bad, there's no way I'm going back.
Right.
So it's not hard, not even slightly hard.
And I think that's critical, is motivation.
Yep.
So for Mum, it's really clear that she's got strong motivation. She's determined to stay on track because... for her, that understanding that the chocolate cake will make me feel bad is really clear and strong. That's obviously not necessarily the case when you're starting out.
Yeah.
Right? That's not a lesson that we've learnt yet.
Yeah.
So that can definitely be more challenging. I talk in the book about making sure that you take on something that you do feel motivated about.
Yeah.
So for some people, that's going to be... I've got a disease, I want to see my symptoms change, I'm going to take on a big chunk of change because I want to see a big chunk of change in return. So for some people, that's plenty of motivation. But for others, when motivation is different or smaller, or just, I want to prevent disease, that's very different because you haven't experienced the disease yet.
Yep.
Necessarily. Or your symptoms might be quite mild. So for that sort of situation, I think it's really important to choose something that feels as convenient as possible.
Yeah.
And whether that's, I want to take on sugar because that feels like a really big deal. That might feel inconvenient. But starting there rather than worrying about everything might be best.
So you think sugar initially would have a greater impact on health than getting rid of meat?
There's lots of things about sugar in that eating sugar changes your taste. So removing sugar means you're going to enjoy the taste of fruit and vegetables more. Yeah. Which will then make it much easier for you to say, hey, this dish tastes great. I don't need to add the meat, or I don't need to add cream on top, or I don't need to, whatever it is. Which then makes it easier down the track to say, I'm going to reduce my dairy, or I'm going to reduce my red meat.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is. So in that sense, starting with sugar can be quite helpful because it can help you later on.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a reason that we've put it as first up.
Right.
That's not to say that you have to take it first up. It's also not to say that you necessarily have to consider that you're never, ever, ever, ever going to have sugar. You know, a lot of us have important occasions that we feel like it's appropriate to eat the birthday cake as part of celebrating with your family. I think it's really important to actually sit down and say, what does this mean to me? You know, if I'm cutting out sugar, am I going to feel terrible at the birthday party? Am I going to feel annoyed at my birthday? Or am I going to feel like I'm missing out at, you know, Christmas or whatever celebration or thing that really means something to you? Or is it that it's your grandmother's cake recipe that you want to be able to cook and make every now and again? You know, I think it's really important to recognize what our values are, and that if some of the things that we really value really include sugar, well, how can you make that work for you? And is that like, could you cut the sugar in half in the recipe? Could you have it less often? Can you just have it at the special occasion? Can you have a really small amount? But then for the rest of your time, can you not have it? So that you can find some balance that's going to work for you with your values, and not actually, because so many of us find that we get derailed at Christmas, or we get derailed at the birthday party. So how can you change what you're doing there so that, okay, I'm going to have the piece of birthday cake, but I haven't put icing on it. I cut the sugar in half, or I replaced it with dextrose and rice malt syrup, so it actually doesn't have any sugar, even though it's sweet. Or, you know, I want to bake with my kids. How am I going to do that so that I'm not piling them with sugar? And, you know, the two good replacements that we have are dextrose and rice malt syrup. So dextrose is a powder that they use in beer production. Rice malt syrup is a syrup. So you can kind of replace them. So if there's honey in a recipe, just use rice malt syrup. It tastes very similar. It's got the same level of sweetness. You can then, you know, you can still cook your cake. And you can produce that cake if that's what means a lot to you. But you can produce it in a much less or zero, you know, sugar. Fructose, way. And still get to enjoy that occasion. So I think there's lots of things that you can consider to try and make that realistic so that it actually stays with you long term.
Okay. So there's some alternatives there in terms of if you're willing to make a few things, you can still enjoy the taste of sweetness.
Oh, absolutely. My granddaughter, Jess's daughter, Joy, and I make chocolate brownies when she's around my house, and they're
she doesn't. Do they notice the difference?
No,
like,
she
does have sugar in this one.
She loves it. She loves them.
Yeah, she does.
I mean, they don't taste any different. But.
No.
What about people who maybe they've got something on their mind, and I know I've done this myself as well, where I'll be kind of consumed by worrying about something, and then I'll go to the supermarket and I naturally gravitate to something that's really bad for me. So what would you say in that situation where people are really struggling to kind of battle it, not because it's too difficult to cook this healthy food, but mainly because it's like it's their go-to. It's like their addiction to like make themselves feel a bit better.
I think you know, addiction's a good word for that. Potentially, and you know, sugar is addictive. There's plenty of research showing that sugar is addictive. And I think we actually have to be aware of that. We have to admit that. And that lots of products that we might not think have sugar in them do. Things like salt and vinegar chips, like some of the oily products that we go to when we want comfort food, might actually also be giving us that little bit of sugar that's helping us still crave that when we're wanting something. I think it's really important to not waste energy getting guilty about making those decisions. You know, I think everyone's been there in life. But the whole purpose of the book really is to try and give people more awareness and understanding so that they know that the salt and vinegar chips has a bit of sugar in it. It's going to get you a bit addicted to that. Maybe that's why I'm craving that.
Yeah.
So you've got more awareness so you can make better decisions. You know, it's not that we're perfect. I'm not perfect. But we can have more knowledge to make different choices so that maybe we might recognize that, oh, I'm really craving that. I'm really feeling stressed. You know, even if it is okay, I don't have the energy to cook right now, but what could I eat that will still do good things for my body? And recognizing that you know, that our mental health is connected to our gut and what feeds our gut, the food that we eat. So understanding that connection a bit better might help us to make a slightly better decision in that situation. Doesn't have to be a perfect decision, but we're trying to give people a resource so that they've got more knowledge to hopefully make better choices, but also something that they can turn to and say, oh, I just got into that habit again. You know, what can I do differently? Why was it that I didn't want to do that? Like, what, you know, that they can come back and read a bit more. Or if, you know, we start off making one change, that maybe one change is enough to start with. And maybe it is, you know, that being vegetarian is an easier option than getting rid of sugar to start with. That might feel easier. Start with something that feels easy or easier. But that the book can hopefully be a resource to people to be like, okay, I've done that for a while. That's good. What else can I do? What can I do next? And to come back and, you know, maybe make another change. We've also tried to set up a Facebook page as well to give people more regular access to recipes, to articles, to help remind you of this stuff. And also to just be another resource when you're looking for something, or to, you know, we're posting some recipes from other sites that have heaps of recipes, just to try and give people a resource of like, okay, I want a new meal, where can I go? And to try and help direct people to something that's, you know, got some really good nutritional value.
So that's my next question actually. Where can people find you? How can I get more information on this if they need it? Okay,
well, we have a website, which is www.lovethefoods.setyoufree.com. And a Facebook site of the same name. This is the book. Love. You have to hold it up here so they can see it up there. Love the Foods That Set You Free. You can buy it on the website if you want to, or it's also on Amazon and on Book Depository. Okay. Yes, I'd just like to add a couple of words to what Jess said. My intention, my passion here is to get this information out there. So people can use whatever they want to out of this book to improve their health. It's in their own hands. And this is the thing I didn't understand, that my health is in my hands. And they can take whatever they want from it. They can do as much or as little as they like, but they will find that any of the steps they take that we recommend, they will start feeling better. They can make their own choices as to how they do that. Okay. Well, Sarah, Jessica, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Than's been a pleasure. It has been a pleasure.
So that was Sarah and Jessica talking about their book, Love the Foods That Set You Free. So if you want to get in contact with Sarah or Jessica, you can go to their website, which is displayed on the screen here now. And you can also go onto their Facebook group, which is in a link in the description panel on this video. If you'd like any more information, please feel free to contact MindSet or look at the description panel and you'll be able to see any other information you need. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.